Hello, and welcome to Pod Softball, a Lovecraft book club. I'm your host, Todd Beardsley.
And I'm Claire Reynolds.
Today, we're discussing last week's story, The Statement of Randolph Carter by H.P. Lovecraft, which was first published in the May 1920 issue of The Vagrant. How are you, Claire, now that we're through this
I'm
dumb
pretty good.
storm?
How are you? Yeah.
Good. I was very excited about this storm. It was very thundery and scary, and I thought it would be great ambiance, like natural ambiance, to record today's podcast, but it also killed all of our electricity and destroyed our first recording. So we're going to do this again.
That was weird.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was a tight little ghost story. I enjoyed it. As I was talking about before we got interrupted by nature, there's a lot of scene setting. And I said that's about 2/3 of the story.
Yeah.
Is scene setting, which sometimes I get impatient with that kind of thing, but then I just have to accept that that's the point of it.
That's his style. I would say that is like peak Lovecraft. Even though this is one of the first stories that he published, it might be the third or the fourth. I haven't looked at The Tomb is usually cited as the first true Lovecraft story. He had published things earlier than that, but anyway, what this is though is the first story that anyone counts as being part of the mythos, because it involves Randolph Carter, which is the most recurring character in Lovecraft, and is often cited as a stand-in for Lovecraft. He is the most Lovecrafty of all the characters, and he spends basically his whole life in Lovecraft stories. He figures prominently in the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. He is in the Silver Key. He's in mostly of those Dreamlands stories of Lovecraft, and he is the I don't know, like he's the Iron Man of Lovecraft. He ties it together. In a time where no one cared about cinematic universes. So let's talk about this story a little bit. As you said, it is very sceney. It takes place in Florida, which is unusual for Lovecraft. Most of his stuff, as you know, takes place in New England, usually in like the Boston and backwoods Massachusetts kind of areas. But this one's in Florida. And it's essentially Randolph Carter is telling, it's not stated, but he's telling police about his whereabouts on the night of Harley Warren's disappearance. Harley Warren being a friend of Carter, but that relationship seems a little unbalanced, which we can talk about a little bit. We are to believe from the story that Randolph Carter is the last person to see Harley Warren alive, and a witness puts him on Gainesville Pike outside of Big Cypress Swamp. One of the most disturbing features of the story is the questioning of a suspect without a lawyer present. And so, Claire.
Oh, what? I'm shocked. I mean, that never happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll have you note that he has not requested a lawyer.
He has not in the story, and he dares the cops to execute him, to not only keep him and interrogate him, but to execute him. I mean, if that will further their weird sense of justice, or whatever he says.
Be it from me to defend the police, but no, he didn't ask for a lawyer.
He didn't, and so this is the 20s. So this story is published in the 20s. It was written in 1919. And I'm curious, and I know that I'm like ambushing you with this because we don't rehearse these podcasts at all.
Now I'm Googling Miranda.
Before Miranda, who was a scoundrel, how common was it for police to interrogate presumably a suspect? Like, I can think of no other reason why the cops would talk to Carter. other than that they believe that they killed him or had something to do with his disappearance. Like, how common was it for people? And I'll even say like pre Miranda and post Miranda. Like, what's the percentage differences there of people talking to cops without advice of counsel?
I have
Claire.
no idea what the answer to that question is. I mean, if you're asking me, okay, so here's the thing. The cops, like, I can tell you now, they are going to speak to a suspect
Mhm.
until that suspect says, I'm not talking to you anymore, get me a lawyer.
Okay.
It might continue on, but
So do you know, like, or even have a suspicion with that? Because famously we're podcasters, so we don't research things. Um, Pre Miranda, how would that work out for a suspect?
um, I honestly have no idea. I mean, my guess is they just immediately went into it. The way that they,
Hmm.
God, every time I talk, every time I engage in this podcast, I feel like I kind of stir up some kind of controversy. I don't know. I am purely speaking out of my ass right now,
Uh huh.
in a
Right.
non non literal sense. Um,
Uh huh. Figuratively, got it.
figuratively, thank you.
Uh huh.
I mean, I would assume that they would just immediately go right into the torture.
Yeah.
I mean,
Just like
as,
gut punch them or whatever. Now,
as they still do now, as long as they're not
sure.
recording. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
That's my
Right.
what I think
And that
happens.
right. And so and it's in Florida and it's in like kind of nowhere's Florida, which we'll
Yeah,
get into in a minute. But
but I assume he's a
um,
white man. So
he's white,
yeah,
like I said, like he's a stand-in for Lovecraft. So like we can just assume that he kind of looks like Lovecraft, kind of lanky.
at this point, they just think they're just asking about a missing guy, right?
Yeah, we're just asking
Th-
questions.
There's no, but yeah, they're just asking questions. Listen, there's no body or
You can
anything.
clear all of this up.
So in my head, what I liked to imagine was
Hmm.
that, okay, so the cops are like, hey, can we ask you a few questions? And then he immediately starts vomiting out like this entire story.
Now, I'm
Like,
going to tell you some
whoa.
things, and it's going to be crazy, but just bear with me.
And like all they do is that like this dude's wife it was like, hey, can you start asking some questions about where this guy might be? Like they had no idea. They're like, oh
He hung
boy.
out with Carter some, I guess. Maybe. Yeah, I seen him. He was down in he was down in the big cypress swamp.
Yeah, so Ice T and Richard Belzer are like, whoa. All right, they got to step aside. They're like, do you believe the story this guy's telling us? And
Something about a sepulcher?
it,
What even is that?
uh,
I like the reading of this story as a police procedural, which I think
yes, it
may
very
be
much
a
is.
first. I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I listen to HP Podcraft mainly to find out all the jokes I can't tell. Um, and and they're great. Like, but they're in their 500th episode, so they've already like blown through all of Lovecraft by this point. I have to go like way back in their catalog to listen to actual Lovecraft stuff. But they're great. They're funny and but as far as I know, no one has has treated the statement of Randolph Carter as a police statement, and it's in the title.
I
So I
100% like when I heard you telling the story, I was like, oh, this is like basically like, last week on Law and Order, this this happened.
so let's for people who for some reason did not listen to last week's episode, we can recap here. So basically, and like Claire mentioned, it is a tight ghost story. It is a story about a guy named Carter who goes out into the swamp with his friend named Warren, um, and they unearth a tomb. They basically move something aside. They move like a granite slab aside. Warren dips in and ends up getting eaten or whatever. Like there's a horrible ending, right? And that's it. Like that's the entirety of the story. So which makes me it puts me in the mind like I think the normal reading of the story is that of a campfire story that you tell when you're camping in the swamp because you're in the like Florida Boy Scouts or whatever. But I much prefer it as a police procedural. I think that's awesome. And so and another thing I like about the story a lot is that it's kind of an adventure story. Carter and Warren, they're geared up. Like I can read this story and we have Arkham Horror card game on the brain, and so I read the story and it's like, oh, they have a shovel. That's a
Hmm.
resource that they have. They have a long ass telephone wire that lets them do a thing. They have a lantern. Like they have all this equipment to go adventuring.
Yeah,
Um,
don't get I mean, get me started on the telephone. Like, was that a thing where I mean,
Telephone
they
is
had a cell
awesome.
phone. I was like, they have a cell phone with them. I mean, not really a cell phone, but they have a two tin cans and a string, I guess.
So this tech, I mean, it is a telephone. Does it say telephone in the text?
I
I
believe
think
it
it does.
does.
And he's got enough wire to go to the center of the earth and back, which is, for one, it's a reference, right, to Journey to the Center of the Earth. And secondly, it's a
Probably an
shitload of wire.
exaggeration. Like, I
It
don't
right,
think he
it
actually had
probably
enough.
not,
Yeah.
right? But he's got a lot of wire. He's got like a big ass spool of wire on his shoulder. And I kind of imagine Harley Warren as kind of a beefy dude, like a bigger guy, like basically someone who is manlier than Lovecraft, which is not hard, but someone who has like he's more broad shouldered and he like he's kind of a stern jawed adventurer type, and he's in it, right? And Carter in this story, since this is the first appearance of Carter in the story, first appearance at least in the Lovecraft mythos, he's a neonate, right? Like he's a noob, and he's studying at the feet of Carter, who has access to a bunch of forbidden knowledge. Like this is the first introduction of a theme that comes over and over again in Lovecraft, of forbidden texts and secret writing. This it's not the Necronomicon, almost certainly, because the Necronomicon like is in Latin and in German and in English, which are all languages that Carter presumably knows because he states that he knows a bunch of languages. But this was written in a language that the book that Warren is working off of for this experiment, whatever he's doing, is written in a language that Carter doesn't know. And so there's gaps, right, in Carter's knowledge. So Carter is the student in this story. Warren is like the kind of manly, kind of macho adventurer type, which I like. I like that contrast. But yeah, so this telephone though is probably the highest tech gadget around. I don't know if it existed in 1920. I cannot imagine it did, because you'd need power. Um, it's basically like a portable wired two node, telephone system. It's a little fantastical, which I think is okay, right? Because that's Lovecraft, right? He writes about fantasy and proto sci-fi and horror. So like this kind of like technological gadget that lets them talk to each other, A, it's important for the story, but B, like in the realm of the possible in 1920. But it does evoke for me like kind of like the Wild Wild West sort of style of steampunk. I very much want to cosplay Harley Warren with just like a bunch of cable. And I'm gonna keep talking until you interrupt me. So
No, I just like it. Go on. No, it just occurred to me that okay, so I finally Googled. I had assumed while
mhm.
reading this that he had based this on the story of Howard Carter and King Tut's tomb
Mhm.
until I just now Wikipedia'd it and realized that that happened in 1923. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, the very famous exploration of King Tut's tomb, um, is contemporary with Lovecraft. Uh,
But
and
this
we'll get
story was
into
written
that.
before that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, did Lovecraft ever hang out in
I'm so
Florida?
glad you asked that. So I did some research, and I want to take you. I want to take you on a little bit of a journey with the Lovecraft Travel Agency. So, as you know, I want to travel to every spot that Lovecraft has ever written about. And we were in Florida, and we could have done it if I had any brains in my head, because it is very, very South Florida is where Big Cypress Swamp is.
Yes.
Notably, it
Miami.
is it is way closer to Miami than it is to Gainesville. Gainesville is several hundred miles north,
Yeah. So
and
what did
so
he just look at a map and was like, let's
Gainesville, whatever. That sounds good. There is no Gainesville Pike. So I've sent you a link to the map of where this thing is, and it is on the very tip of Florida, and it is on the what is that? That is on the west coast of Florida.
yes.
But it's actually pretty close to Miami. It's probably 100 and not 200 miles from Miami, where it is in fact like almost 400 miles away from Gainesville, which is way north.
Yeah.
The best map I have of this is Hammond's map of Florida from 1910. That's about the most contemporary I could get. I don't think there was a lot of road construction in Florida between 1910 and 1920, but maybe there was. Maybe someone built a Gainesville Pike. That seems unlikely.
Yeah, it's really not close to Gainesville.
It is about as far away from Gainesville as you could be. Now, that doesn't mean like we live in Austin and every street nearby us is named after another city in Texas. So maybe there's a Gainesville Pike, at least in the Lovecraftiverse. But in the real world, my guess is that he was spotted on State Road 29, uh, also known at the time as Fakahatchee Road, uh, and right near where Big Cypress Swamp starts. And so, for the purposes of the Lovecraft Travel Agency, someday we have to go back to Florida and visit Big Cypress Swamp, at least like the touristy parts of it. Maybe we'll find a grave site there. It seems unlikely, however, because I also looked at the water table in Florida, in that region of Florida, and it being a swamp, um, it on the outside, you have 20 feet between the ground and the water table. Most of the area, almost all of the area, is within 0 to 5 feet, is what it's listed on a topographical map. So, which raises a question for me of where the heck did Harley Warren go? Because if it's 5 feet to the water table and
Right.
there's no mention of splashing, like to me, so I have two theories. Okay, one,
Uh-huh.
uh, it's a little bit of a hill in the middle of the swamp that gets him a little bit of room. And maybe it's in a weird part of the swamp where the water table is maybe 15 or 20 feet underneath. And so he gets down and then kind of goes straight, right? And then he runs into like, I don't know, a family of ghouls because he says there's more than one. Like he's talking about there's legion of them. It's always plural when Warren is talking. He runs into these
Yeah.
monsters. Um, More likely, Warren had found a gate to another horrible dimension, a horrible monster dimension, which is common in Lovecraft.
As you do.
As you do, which is common not just in Lovecraft, but in like basically every Lovecraft board game, card game, role playing game. There's gates littered everywhere. And so he has this forbidden text that describes a gate to another dimension that is disguised as a Richard Garriott style necropolis is a gate in the swamp. Yeah, and you had asked earlier. It feels like eons ago. You had asked had Lovecraft ever hung out in Florida? He did. He did famously, but it was later in life. It was not. It was definitely not in 1919, 1920. So he would have been. I think he was in his 40s, and he went to go visit a fan in Florida and ended up living there for weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm a little bit sketchy on the details there because I haven't looked it up recently, but there was like this whole thing. There was a 16-year-old kid who was writing to Lovecraft, and Lovecraft went to go visit him, and he didn't know he was 16. Like the kid was like,
Oh.
kind of keeping that close to the chest, and the kid was like super gay.
Uh-huh.
Lovecraft was not, question mark, but did end up living with him and his mother for weeks. And they did like Boy Scout campy things, like they went and fished and gathered flowers and stuff, and like did swampy things.
Hmm.
But that was much later in Lovecraft's life. So not only did he predict the the exploration of King Tut's tomb, but he predicted his own adventure in Florida with this like kind of very kind of hyper masculine relationship, as described with Warren, which I do want to talk about a little bit.
But hear me now, believe me later. We can easily crush girly men like grape.
Harley clearly knows what he's doing, but Carter does not, and it's written in the sense where like he's retelling the story to the cops, about why he's there, and it's like it kind of becomes apparent in his telling of the story that he doesn't super know why he's there. But he's like, yeah, I was friends with this guy, and we went out to the swamp, and we found this grave site, this charnel spot full of sepulchers,
Sepulchers.
and huh
Sepulcher.
sepulchers, which is one of the many names of our cat. He has like 12 names, and this is the most recent. But he just kind of finds himself out there, not super understanding what's going on, which brings up two things for me. One, he's telling the story to the cops, so this has got to sound fishy to the cops, right? Like,
Right. Oh, of
so
course.
let me
Yeah.
let me get this straight. This guy took you out to the swamp, went into a tomb or sepulcher, or whatever you want to call it, and that was it. That was the last time he saw me. Yeah. Well, why were you
Uh-huh.
there? I don't know. Like, I mean, this has got like Florida man written all over it. Secondly, though, from a literary point of view, Lovecraft has stated that he wrote this after having a dream about it. Like, this is basically the plot of his dream, and I do like, if you know that when you're reading it, you really do get the sense that it's very dreamlike, where like you're in a situation and you're not super sure what's going on, but clearly you're meant to like move this tombstone and do a thing, and like, oh, look at that, I have lanterns, I guess I brought them with me. Like it has that kind of feeling to it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of dreamy, which makes sense for Randolph Carter specifically, because he figures so prominently in later Dreamland stories. Like, I'm wondering if this adventure in Florida is really kind of like his first like step into the Dreamlands as another dimension, like as an established dimension, that exists alongside around. So like I found that pretty interesting, um, and that's all I'm gonna say on that matter. I do kind of think it's a little bit though the former, again with the police procedural of, well, so why were you there? I don't know. Like, I feel like the story has edited out all the cops' questions, and it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
You're hearing only the one side here.
Well, I mean, he just sounds like he's just vomiting it out. Like I think they maybe asked him like two
Yeah.
questions and now they just sat back.
And like Pickman's model, like it's not like on first reading and maybe second reading, like you might think this is the day after, right? Like just with Pickman's
Right.
model, it's like, where did this dude go? Well, let me tell you about it. Like, this may be a month or 3 months after,
Yeah.
like, and I control F through the story of like, well, when does he ever actually say last night or a week ago or anything like that? He gives no time reference. All he
Yeah.
knows is that the events that happened must have been close to midnight or after, because of the position of the moon in the sky, which is, by the way, like a terrible way to tell time, because the moon like jumps all over the place over the course of a 28-day cycle. It is very difficult to tell time by moon. Like, sun, you're on. Moon, not so much.
Right.
So anyway, he describes the position of the moon, which would, I guess, if you're an astronomer in the 20s, like you could maybe like do some like cool forensic work on that, but I'm doubting these Florida cops are in that position. So who knows? Who knows
Yeah.
when this happened? This could have been a year ago. Like we have no idea in the story.
I also get a distinct vibe of like when my 10-year-old son is in trouble.
Your 9-year-old son.
Oh, he'll be 10 in just like a week or so. Yeah, but you're right. My 9-year-old son, sorry, I've aged him prematurely. Of like me asking a question and then all
Uh-huh.
of a sudden I'm getting a start like, oh, okay, oh, and then what? So you're telling me he had he went in with enough wire to go to the center of the earth. Oh,
Uh-huh.
okay, all
Oh.
right. And
And
interesting.
you were
Where did he get
talking to
that?
him on the phone.
Yeah, where did he get the wire from? Did they carry that much at Home Depot? Okay, yeah, it's. I don't know. I thought that was super funny when I was reading this
Yeah.
because I was like, well, okay, it's.
Yep.
I can't tell you. It's too utterly beyond thought. I dare not tell you.
This is the button on the story too, right? Where he wants to tell them, but he's like, oh, by the way, I have amnesia.
Right.
Again, literary wise, like this makes sense. Like you're going to have gaps in your story because dreams don't make sense. And that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking to the cops and you say, and I saw something so horrible, I can't possibly describe it. I don't know. I don't think they're going to take that as an answer. You know, it's like, yeah, I told you everything I'm going to tell you and I haven't lied at all, except there are big gaps. And I'm just going to say that up front. And also he repeats that, like the whole story is basically repeated twice. I
Yeah.
don't know, like when you read it, if you read it critically, you're like, wait a minute, didn't he just say that like 3 paragraphs ago? So it does have the pattern, and I don't know if this was like intentional by Lovecraft to have the patter of a police interrogation. Maybe it is because it's in the title.
I don't know. It might. I mean, because that's what they do
Oh,
is they're going to ask you
yeah,
this. They're going to ask you to repeat your
yep,
story like 12 times and find out where
yep,
you change it.
yep, yep. But like he
I'm telling you, I
conveniently
think he
doesn't
murdered.
change anything. You think he
Yeah.
killed him? You think you think Carter just straight up murdered Harley Warren, his best friend, the Harley Warren who incidentally made fun of him and his courage and his nerves. You
Uh-huh.
think he killed him, Claire?
Yeah.
Does the prosecution rest? I think we found it out, folks.
Definitely not the
This is
prosecution.
breaking again.
Yeah,
Like I feel like I have a breaking news, like
you know,
2
people,
episodes in a row now. Breaking news: Randolph Carter killed Harry Warren.
people are saying that.
Uh huh.
People are saying that he killed him.
I like this theory. I like the theory of the crime holds.
Yeah.
I mean, no one saw him again. And by the way, like I know we have spent twice as much time talking about the story as I took reading the story. But here, and I kind of thought this would be a short episode. We'll see how it goes, how it survives editing. I mean, I'm probably going to cut 20 minutes out at least. Harley Warren is taking Randolph Carter on this adventure, right? Like he's bringing a book that Carter can't read to
Right.
go to a place, and he hasn't really filled in Carter on what's going on because everything's a surprise to him. It would appear to me that the entire purpose of bringing Carter was to help him move the slab. Like that is literally the only thing he does in this adventure. He just like, hey dude, can you like maybe throw a little bit of muscle on this? And because otherwise this is my thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. That's all he asked him to do is just help him move the slab.
Yep. Now he does, when he gets into trouble, he's like, Carter, you got to get out of here. Like he clearly cares about him.
Yeah.
1 is better than 2 and all of that. Like he assumes Carter is able to move the slab by himself, which I think is like also maybe trolling him a little. Like, oh, you got to move that slab back. Okay, if you can.
Okay, then there's also the whole beat it. For God's sake, put back the slab and beat it. Beat it, Carter. beat it. It's like,
Yep.
what if he's just messing with him the whole time? That's what he's
He
done.
may be fucking with him. Yeah, he
He's
may be fucking
like,
with him.
oh yeah, you better run, Carter.
You think that he went to like the nude moon? Like
Right? Nude on the moon.
he went he went to the
Uh,
dimension of like hot chicks and bong rips, and he
no,
doesn't want to let Carter know.
I mean, what? If you wanted to mess with somebody, do
Yeah,
it.
you would totally do this. Yeah, you would. God, that Warren is such a dick.
I mean, it's almost
Also,
as
and
you know.
go ahead.
Well, no. Here's what happened. Okay, I finally
All
figured
right,
it out.
you have a new theory
So
of the case.
no, it's not new. It's
All
just
right.
expanded. Okay,
Okay.
so because in every story there is an element of the truth.
Sure.
So Warren took Carter out here and was totally messing with him,
Uh-huh.
and or Carter got mad and bashed him over the head.
I gotcha. Because he couldn't have gone deep because of the water table, right? So he like shielded the lantern or turned it off or whatever, and then like made this whole thing. And then he came out, and Carter's like, "You motherfucker," and then just like gave him the
Yeah,
shovel treatment, is what you're
yeah.
telling me, and probably buried him out there. And then the cops show up. Who knows how much later? 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. Hey, what were you guys doing out there?
What book are you going to have that tells you what
From
ancient,
India.
some ancient from India that tell
Uh-huh.
this is like, the Latter-day Saints. I mean, this is
Yep.
like this is a Mormon book that tells you that like,
The
oh,
Mormon ghouls.
there's an ancient, there's an ancient being buried in Florida.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are a lot of ancient beings buried in Florida. This whole thing just stinks. If I'm a cop,
Uh-huh.
I don't believe a word
Carter
coming
did
out
it.
of his mouth.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. I am excited to find out what happens to Randolph Carter over the course of the mythos. I'm pretty sure he gets away with this one, though.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah. No, this definitely
yeah.
makes me want to like treat this whole thing as like a story arc in Law and Order.
Uh-huh.
And
Definitely with Ice-T.
we're gonna revisit.
I just started following Ice-T's Twitter. It's
Oh,
kind
I
of
love him.
awesome. It's kind of
He's
great.
yeah.
I mean, he's constantly like challenging people to fights, and the dude's like, what? How
Oh,
old is he? It's got to be
I
at
don't
least
know.
55.
He's
You
ageless.
know? Yeah. Anyway,
Uh,
so Ice-T watch here on
yep.
Podsatha. So cool. I think we're good. I
I
think
think
we've
so.
covered 45 minutes of this
45 minutes
of
of,
recording, which may
of
get condensed down to
law
20.
and order
Yeah.
colon
Special cultist unit.
special cultist unit. That's the U.
Dreamlands.
It's with the New Zealand
Dreamlands detail.
the New Zealand cops and Ice-T.
So Wellington Paranormal, but also
Yes,
Ice-T is there.
right.
And so's Mulder.
And then Florida.
And also it's in Florida. Oh my God. TM. We're gonna pitch this
Yep.
probably to NBC end of the week. So cool. I think I've hit all my notes and that's it. So
All right.
by the way, if you want to like take a trip down memory lane with this, if you are an old timey Lovecraft person, I did stumble across the archive of the Shadow over Usenet coverage of this. This was back when Usenet was a thing. I assume it's still a thing, but it was kind of where people talked about the internet and things on the internet back in the 90s. This was dated 1995, April 10th, 1995 was the Shadow over Usenet thread on Usenet. So I will post that in the show notes if you want to read through that. It's actually pretty short, not a lot of talk about this, which I don't know why, because we just spent 45 minutes talking about it, and it's clearly an unsolved murder in South Florida. So check that out. That'll be in the show notes. I'll link to the map, to Hammond's 1910 map of Florida, which is interesting. mainly because there were very few roads in Florida in 1910. And I think that's it. So thank you, Claire, so much for hanging out on this podcast with me. Even though you won't listen to it, it's still great that you'll at least record. This has been Pod Sothoth, a Lovecraft book club, hosted, edited, and produced by me, Todd Beardsley. Thanks to my very special guest, Claire Reynolds, for discussing the Statement of Randolph Carter with me today. Next week, I'll be reading The Cats of Ulthar by H.P. Lovecraft, so be sure to come back then. In the meantime, you can also follow the show on Twitter. It's @PodSothoth, or you can email at hideous@podsothoth.club. If you do email, please be sure to include some pronunciation tips on your name, for your missive may be read on the show.